Hey, welcome back to the pod. This will be the Week 5 recap and the Week 6 preview. We had, I think, 5 ranked versus ranked games last week that Steele and I previewed, and a couple of them were pretty entertaining. Couple, or maybe specifically Washington BYU was not, but definitely started to get a little bit better of an idea about some of these teams that we're about to talk about. So, first game was at noon, West Virginia, Texas Tech, and Steele and I, when we previewed this game, we said that we were interested to see how Texas Tech would respond after thumping Oklahoma State in Stillwater.
Yeah.
We wanted to see if they were for real or if there'd be a hangover, and then we wanted to see if West Virginia continued to basically dominate or control the games like they had been. They hadn't really played anybody yet. Tennessee never counts as an opponent.
Yeah.
But in that game, West Virginia we got some notes here. They averaged 6.7 yards per play to Texas Tech's 5.2. This game was really about Texas Tech lost the turnover battle. They had 3 turnovers. West Virginia played a clean game. They had none.
West Virginia jumped out to a big lead. Tech kind of, they tried to rally at the end, made it close, but West Virginia really controlled the game in the first half.
Yeah, and they kind of dicked around in the second half. I think they were up 35-10 at halftime. And so Steele and I talked about that being a good bet that we both made. We thought Texas Tech, there would be a hangover. It's a team that I think it's like one of those teams that they don't have like that kind of win against Oklahoma State that often. So like we don't think they are used to like handling that kind of win and like the pressure of like being a ranked team that well. So that's why we felt like we were going to take the small favorite in West Virginia, a team that we trust. Will Greer, we trust that team a little bit more.
I feel like Texas Tech is they're just kind of random. You never really know what you're going to get.
Yeah,
you could get something like that Oklahoma State game, and then the next week they look
like
shit.
What's his face? The freshman Bowman had been playing really well for them in this game. He wasn't playing as well. He got hurt. He had to leave the game.
Yeah, he was actually playing awful when he was in there.
Right. So I think what Addison said, this team's going to be a hard team to bet going forward just because like you don't know what to expect. Like maybe the over is like a more safe play than anything, but
usually their overs are pretty good.
Yeah. So
what was the over in this one?
I actually think it was
because it hit 76, but that might not have even got there.
I think Steele had. I think it was like 77.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so
it sounds like the default for a lot of Tech's games.
Yeah, like 77 plus type of thing, like 11 touchdowns. So. Yeah, I think like the main takeaway from this game is West Virginia is clearly, I think one of like the two, maybe like one of the top 2 teams in the Big 12, maybe like top 3. We're not 100% sure yet, but it's going to be hard to tell with West Virginia because we have their schedule right here, and we're not going to really know. Like I have in my notes, I want to see them play a tougher team and see what they look like against a good team, but until November, that really doesn't happen. Like they have Kansas next week. Easy win, or next weekend. Then they're at Iowa State. That could be like a tricky game, but they're the better team. Then they have a bye week. Then they have Baylor on a Thursday night at home. So until they get to November, where then they have at Texas, TCU, at Oklahoma State, and then Oklahoma home on a Friday night, that's where we're going to find out if this team's a legit playoff contender.
Their schedule is really backloaded.
Yeah.
All the good Big 12 teams are in November. So, there's a good chance they're going to be 8-0, highly ranked, could be highly overrated at that point. We'll see.
Sure. Yeah. So
I don't expect them to because they could be 8-0 and then end up 8-4. You know,
they really could. Yes.
But like you said, we don't know about them yet. Yeah. They could be really good. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're I don't know. It's just hard to say. I think their defense has been playing good against the teams they've played so far.
Yeah, that's the thing I've been pretty impressed with. Is like
that's not what I was expecting.
Yeah, anybody that knows college football knew that the offense would be very good. Their receivers are very good. Will Greer is an NFL quarterback. The question with the Big 12 teams is always going to be, can they play good enough defense to compete with like the blue blood programs? Besides like Oklahoma, who even Oklahoma, though, hasn't been playing that great of defense, recently. Like, the whole Big 12 altogether just doesn't seem to play. We've talked about that endlessly in this pod. So, we'll see about West Virginia moving forward. Texas Tech, unpredictable. Not really sure what to make of them right now. But Next game was BYU Washington. We're not going to talk about this game too much. This game, Steele and I, when we previewed it, we actually had a little bit of a misread. We thought BYU could keep the game closer just because we felt like Washington's offense wasn't that strong. But Washington's offense, even though it hasn't been that explosive, it's been pretty efficient, but their defense is elite.
Yeah, and speaking of efficient, defense really good.
Yeah.
But Jake Browning was also 23 of 25.
Yeah, right. So they're not going to really like burn you, and that could cost them against like elite competition. You got to be able to make some plays down the field. You can't just dink and dunk against like the elite teams. But I think Washington's probably the class of the Pac-12 just simply because their defense is that good.
Yeah, it's really suffocating. Washington is, I think they've gone under in every game so far this year.
Yeah.
I had them again this week, so
solid bet. Yeah. Washington had 7.5 yards per play to BYU's 4. BYU was just I didn't get to see a whole lot of this game just because all the good games this weekend were clearly like in the same time slot, basically like 7:30 area.
Yeah.
So I really didn't see a whole lot of snaps from this game, but BYU clearly they lack explosive playmakers.
Yeah, and they probably shouldn't have been ranked. I mean, obviously they're up there because they beat Wisconsin,
right.
But now they kind of get knocked back down to earth a little bit.
Right. So Washington moving forward, they are at UCLA next weekend. Now, as always at the end of the pod, I'll make 6 bets if Erlene have any. It's Sunday night, so the lines just came out. It's kind of hard to say, but I did already bet Washington -21 at UCLA. That could be. It could have been jumping the gun a little bit because they are at Oregon next weekend.
Yeah.
But UCLA, I've seen UCLA play a little bit this year. Their quarterback, their freshman that they play, is horrendous.
Yeah. They're gonna really struggle to score.
They are, like they would have to, I think, have like a defensive or like special teams touchdown to keep this within the number because Washington, like I said, they might not have like a ton of explosive plays against UCLA, but they're efficiently going to move the ball because UCLA is not that good on defense. And UCLA is just, Chip Kelly doesn't have his players in there yet. They don't fit the system. They are bad. So, I think Washington could look ahead and still win this game by 4 touchdowns.
This is a complete throwaway season for UCLA.
Yeah, 100%. It's like year 0, essentially, for Chip Kelly. So, moving forward, Stanford Notre Dame was one of what Steele and I called the premier games for last weekend. Clearly a matchup that I think people were interested to see if Stanford was actually for real. This podcast has been saying all year long that this is one of the more overrated teams we felt like in the country.
Yep.
Notre Dame, the main question going into this game was Ian Book for real. He looked really good against Wake, but it was against Wake. And so we wanted to see how he'd look against Stanford. Stanford traditionally plays pretty good defense. They haven't been quite as good this year, but I think Notre Dame answered some questions this game as far as, again, it's only his second start as far as this year. I don't remember if he started games last year, but Book looked the part, like he looked in command. They moved the ball at will. They had 6.25 yards per play. Stanford had only 4.5. Notre Dame, I think pretty much, like the game was a little close, but they played kind of in dominant fashion at the end.
Yeah, and really, if you look at the stats, they pretty much dominated throughout.
Yeah.
They pretty much doubled up Stanford in yards. It's 550 to 229.
Right.
Stanford, they've had trouble with this year. They haven't been able to get their running game going, and that kind of just kills their whole offense.
Yeah,
the only thing they seem to be able to do is just throw jump balls up to Arcega-Whiteside, who was really good at that.
Who's unstoppable.
That need a little more than just that in your offense.
Yeah.
And the big thing for Notre Dame now, now that they're past this hurdle, they're definitely one of the favorites to make the playoff at the end of the year. I keep wondering if they lose one game, whether they'll get in or not.
I don't know. I think
it's a little early to talk about now, but now that we're kind of like halfway through the season,
this year is interesting because, like we said, it's so top heavy with like teams that we felt like were elite at the top, but there's not going to be 4 12-0 teams. That doesn't happen. So I think Notre Dame, though, of the teams that we're talking about that are playoff contenders, like I have in my notes here, I said at the beginning of the year that I thought they would go 11-1, but looking at their schedule, so this we're going to preview this game coming up in a little bit on this pod. They play at Virginia Tech next weekend. tough place to play. Virginia Tech is a solid program. I'm not so sure if the line. Actually, that's surprising. The line opened at 1.5.
Wow.
Like Notre Dame was only a 1.5 favorite.
That
and
is
weird. There was quick, heavy action on Notre Dame, which should be.
Think,
yeah, I would think should be. So the point is, though, Notre Dame's schedule, and we've said this a few times in this pod already this year, usually very daunting. But this year, at the end of the year, the programs like Florida State and USC, the two games that we point out as like the games that they could lose at the end of the year, those programs are both way down. Like the only game I see on their schedule that I feel like could be like quite tricky is at USC if JT Daniels is a lot better at the end.
Yeah.
Now they're like at Northwestern, they're home against or their neutral site against Syracuse, but they're going to be favored in every game the rest of the way out. So they have a legit shot going 12-0. If they go 12-0, there's no debate.
They'll for sure
with
be
the
in.
other teams. They'll definitely.
The question is, if they go 11-1, who do you think would go? One loss Washington or one loss Notre Dame? I think it's an interesting question.
Ooh, yeah,
because the Pac-12 is down, but I think Washington still has a lot of respect, though.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
And another thing is, say Notre Dame is like, well, they play USC the last week of the season, and Washington likely will be playing USC the next week.
They could be, USC or whoever's coming out south. But it would. I think it'll be USC. Colorado's ranked all of a sudden. I don't think Colorado's that good.
Yeah.
But
no one in the South is good.
Nobody's
right now.
good. Yeah, but that's a good question. I mean, and another one could be, do you take 11-1 Notre Dame or do you take 11-1 Georgia that loses to Alabama?
Yeah, I mean that's another tough question.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, that's why college football is awesome because every game matters so much compared to like the NFL. But yeah,
someone gets left out, and that's not a bad thing. Not everyone can make the playoffs.
Right.
So Ohio State got left out last year. We were pissed, but that's how it is.
Yeah. I think moving forward I was going to look at Stanford real quick to see. So they've got Utah next weekend at home. Could be a spot for them to rebound. But we said all year long we felt like this team was overrated. They should have 2 losses already. And they were dicking around with San Diego State to where they were in danger of losing that game too. So Stanford, according to the AP poll and general consensus was a top 10 team, but Vegas had them rated lower. We on the pod, I think, had them closer to like a top 20 team. And I think they showed that. So Stanford, in my opinion, is out of the playoff now. Like they were in the discussion, obviously, but I think they're out now. I mean, sure, could they run the table and get back into it? But they're not going to run the table. So
they're at Washington later in the season.
Yeah, at Washington, at Cal won't be easy. At Arizona State's not, and that's a Thursday night game. I mean, that's going to be interesting. So next game was the other premier game of the night. Actually, you know what? Before we get into that, let's just, I guess, go over Oregon Cal real quick. Later night game, I believe the spread, I think at kickoff, Oregon was like a 1.5 or 2 point favorite. And it seemed like there were a lot of people that were on Cal. Cal's played a little bit better defense this year. We said on the pod last week we didn't know a ton about them yet. We felt like they were well coached, better defense. The offense wasn't quite as good, but Oregon, personally, I think showed us on the pod a lot last weekend when they played, or 2 weekends ago, I should say. Last weekend when they played Stanford. When
it was just such a fluky loss.
It was, yeah. They gifted the game away. There were so many ways that they could have won the game. Steele and I covered that pretty well, but Herbert's really good, and Oregon. Under Cristobal, like maybe, I don't know, they almost seem like maybe they're like, they gave up some yards. Look, they had 7.6 yards per play against Cal, who was supposed to be a good defense.
Yeah.
And Cal had almost 6 yards per play. Now, Oregon was +4 in turnovers. I think this is a legit team. Like, I actually think they could, they
host Washington.
They host Washington. Too. Like, that's a big game.
And so this week, Oregon's got a bye. And then that Washington game.
Right.
So they've got time off, get ready for Washington. That's going to be a big game.
And Washington won't be off a bye.
Right.
And it's going to be big. Like Oregon, they win that game, they could be in the driver's seat for this division and this conference perhaps.
Yeah,
so
it is interesting now that we've seen Oregon, actually play some
real football games.
Some actual football teams.
Yeah.
And they look really good.
Yeah.
Even though they've got the loss.
Right.
So yeah, they're kind of interesting now. They kind of are making the Pac-12, you know, a little better in people's eyes. I think.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
think like deeper. Like
Yeah.
we weren't sure about them, and now we actually like. I actually think they could play with some teams from like other conferences. Like I think Herbert's that kind of player. Like I think he just makes them that good. So we'll move on to the other premier game now. Obviously the Ohio State Penn State game, and this game started out very surprisingly to me, and I think a lot of people. I think Ohio State's their offensive machine basically just didn't exist in the first half. I think as we're getting David from New Orleans on the phone here to bring him in on this, but we'll see if he starts here.
Hey, what's up?
What's up?
Everything's good. What's up with y'all?
Oh, we're good. We're just we are getting into the
Ohio State
Penn State game now.
Yeah. All right.
So I'll start with Penn State for the game, averaged 6.5 yards per play. Ohio State had 5 yards per play. I thought throughout the game, Penn State brought a lot of pressure to basically disrupt OSU's rhythm. Their goal in the game was to basically shoot the gaps, get in Haskins' face, make a team, and mainly their quarterback, feel uncomfortable when he had been very comfortable all year. And I felt like they did a very good job of that, especially in the first half. Throughout the game until OSU made some late adjustments. With the screen game, they started running the ball a little bit more. They made some smart adjustments where that's clearly what got them back into the game.
Offensively and defensively, because we saw McSorley burn us several times running, and then we kind of spied him a few times later in the game, when they were trying to win at the end. So that was a good adjustment. The screens, I was really happy with that because I've always wondered why Urban Meyer never seems to run like an actual screen pass.
Right.
And in this game, we really needed to just to counter their aggressiveness. And J.K. Dobbins ended up being our leading receiver. He popped a couple good plays on screens, especially
the most important play of the game.
Yeah, when we're backed up.
From the goal line,
Yeah, that was huge.
So, but I think going back to Nick's point, I know we were texting about this last night, but I think that's what Franklin does. It's almost like a 5-week plan because he didn't show. I think he holds a lot back in the early games. Like he didn't show any of that stuff that we saw last night on tape. That was like a completely different game plan. And so like Penn State earlier in the year, like pretty basic defense, blitzing maybe 30-ish%. Last night they blitzed on just about every play.
Yeah.
So it's just, I'm sure Ohio State coached to be ready for it, but they just hadn't seen those schemes on tape. Franklin held it back.
Yeah, and especially like the week before, what we saw from Penn State, they didn't look great defensively. Nick and I thought that we were going to be able to exploit that, and then we were wrong, obviously, because Penn State like showed things that we hadn't seen. They played a lot better defensively. It's the kind of game. Obviously, Penn State played better than us pretty much most of, like the whole game.
Yeah,
but it's a tough place to play, and you really just want to pull out a win any way you can.
Yeah, I think it reminded me a little bit of the TCU game where I felt like TCU just was. I wouldn't say like they were considering it like. I don't know. I think when you play a program like, I'm not trying to sound like an arrogant OSU fan, but when you play a program like that, and I think that a lot of these teams bring like their heaviest punch basically, and it's up to Ohio State to be able to handle that punch. And I think Penn State did outplay us for most of the game, but I felt like OSU's defense was very impressive. Besides like a couple of the gash plays, which is still a problem moving forward.
Yeah.
But the defensive line without Nick Bosa was, really disruptive. Chase Young played an amazing game. Draymond Jones played amazing. The other guys that you don't hear a lot about, Robert Landers, Jonathan Cooper, they played big games, and I felt like
the secondary played better too.
Yeah, I felt like
the defense kept us in the game in the first half too, because the offense just didn't show up.
Yeah, and I think you got to give credit to OSU's the kids on offense for. I think keeping their heads in the game at the end, they could have easily folded in that spot and just been like, you know what, we're just not going to pull this win out. We'll just move on, and we can still complete our goals. We might need some help or whatever, but they could have easily just folded like a lawn chair right then and there. But the coaching staff, hey, look, we're going to basically get the ball in our playmakers' hands. We're going to counter this really aggressive scheme that Penn State brought in the game, and they ended up pulling it out. So I think one of the main takeaways that I have from the game is, I was quite impressed. I was very surprised at Penn State's defense, and like Tolman said, I think it's just I think part of it is Franklin kind of holding back for a first few of these games, and some of the
he's done that. He's done that every year against us.
Yeah.
The kick six game, what he held back was the downfield passing.
Right.
We had no idea, that year we had no idea that Trace McSorley could throw it up like that, and they had 6'5" receivers on the outside that just we didn't see that coming.
Yeah. And the last several years, this series has been ridiculously competitive.
And which is awesome, which is great for college football in general.
Yeah, I think
I love it. You guys know I've been to Happy Valley multiple times for the whiteout.
Right.
You really can't beat it. It's incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was last night when I was watching, I was actually it reminded me of the first whiteout back in 2005 when they just destroyed Troy Smith, and but Haskins mustered it together and handled it.
Credit to Haskins. Huge road game like that, and he had pressure all night, and at the end of the game, he made the plays that he needed to.
Yeah, I think. You guys covered it pretty well. I think OSU moving forward is obviously going to gain a lot of confidence, and Addison and I were saying last night, that's the kind of game that a lot of teams kind of gut out and win. They learn through adversity, and it's kind of the sign of a championship team to play. Yeah, you play poorly and you pull a game out like that.
What I came away with last night. All right, this is a championship team. This is not not like a couple years ago when I got down to Clemson early and just folded.
Yeah,
this is a resilient championship team.
Yeah,
and I always want to see the team, be able to go into a tough road spot like that, because if you want to be a championship team, you got to be able to win games like this.
Yeah, I think
that's why you come to Ohio State to get put on that stage, and everybody was watching last night. So
right. Do you guys think? In my opinion, I'll go first on this one. I think Penn State still is in the playoff discussion. Because I think it's going to be tough, but if they did win out, I think there's a shot that they're going to be involved in that conversation. They get a chance right away. They've got a bye week this weekend, and then they get Michigan at home for their homecoming game.
It's Michigan State.
Oh, it's Michigan State. Sorry, yeah. But regardless, they get a team that could help kind of boost their resume a little bit, but they're going to be hungry to get back on the field in that game. But I think they're personally still in the conversation in a top 10 team. Yeah. Do you feel the same way, or?
As far as the playoff, I don't know. It'll be tough. Getting that tiebreaker in the East is so huge.
Yeah.
They need us to lose twice now to get back in the mix for the Big Ten championship. But
right.
If things fell the right way for them, and they went out, they could be in the discussion.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things have to fall the right way for them, though.
Sure.
So I think they're a rock solid top 10 team.
Yeah. So the thing is
but I think college football is so top heavy this year with just Alabama dominance, Georgia appearing to be dominant, Ohio State, Clemson, and maybe a slight tier below, and then I'd say probably Notre Dame and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So
it is very top heavy.
Those teams are going to have to start falling for Penn State to realistically be in the conversation.
I think
I haven't seen a sign. Look at who some of those teams, like Notre Dame, for example. Look who they have left. They went out Penn State has no chance in that.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make. Is that I think a lot of these teams and conferences they were all rooting hard for Stanford last night in that game,
and Syracuse.
Yeah, and Syracuse, of course, but like mainly Notre Dame's the one that can kind of throw a wrench into things for those teams that, like, let's say the Pac-12 champion, who the Pac-12 is viewed as not as like high of a conference right now. You know, I think Washington was rooting pretty hard for Stanford in that game, and they just Notre Dame is definitely throwing a wrench into this thing because before
here's a scenario. So Notre Dame's undefeated. Georgia and Alabama play each other undefeated SEC championship. I think the loser of that game does not get in, and an undefeated Notre Dame gets out. I think that's how big like an undefeated Notre Dame team is this year.
Notre Dame would be in. I was talking earlier about one-loss Notre Dame. What happens with them against like a one-loss SEC team or one-loss Washington?
I think I would hold Notre Dame in higher regard than Washington, and I think I would hold a one-loss SEC team as long as the game was close in a higher regard than Notre Dame. That's just because of eye test for me on that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting moving forward. I think Ohio State proved, that they could fight through some adversity, and when they played poorly, because I honestly didn't think they played even close to their best game, and they still pulled out a win against what I think is a very good team this year. So it was impressive. I felt like, honestly, I think this game, I think I saw in like Bill C's like the post game probability, like Ohio State was like 52%. So like this game I was surprised that Ohio State still won the game most of the time. Like not most of the time, but like,
I'm actually surprised.
I thought Penn State was going to be more like 60 to 65%. Like I just felt like they outplayed them a little more than that. But
I know ESPN had us at they had Penn State at 96% to win when they scored their last touchdown of the game with 8 minutes to go.
Yeah.
So it's just it was an improbable win based on like how the game had gone, but Ohio State in the end deserved it. You know, it wasn't like Stanford where the Stanford-Oregon game where Oregon just completely gave the game away. Ohio State really fought for this win.
Yeah. So while we have David from New Orleans on, were you able to stay on if you wanted to preview these Week 6 games with us, or do you have to take off?
I can stay on for a few minutes if you want to just pick
one.
Let's go into the game.
We'll start with a big one, then down your way.
Game that you would have like good analysis. Yeah, LSU and Florida. Yeah.
LSU Florida. Yeah. So I think it's probably going to be LSU's toughest test so far this year, and that's just because I think historically the style of play of a Dan Mullen coach team, LSU's really struggled with. You know, they've been blown out by Mississippi State a few times in the past couple of years.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be a really close game, but home field advantage, Death Valley, LSU. I think LSU has a better chance to win.
It's kind of funny how Florida, after they lost to Kentucky, everyone was down on Florida. And now maybe that's not that bad of a loss. So Florida could be a pretty solid team and a good test for LSU in this game.
It looks like the game's in the Swamp, actually.
Oh yeah, it is.
Is the line 7?
It's 3.5. It's actually at Florida.
Florida's favorite.
No,
the game's at Florida.
Yeah, LSU's favorite, but it's at Florida. It's in the Swamp.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, this is. We were talking about this game a little bit before we started the pod tonight because, LSU's looked pretty good this year, but I feel like they're definitely not a top 5 team. I think they're good.
Yeah.
But like you've said it before when you've come on, like they don't have the playmakers like they usually do around Burrow, and like I know that they look good.
I think they're winning. I think they're winning games because their style of play has been a mismatch for some of their opponents.
Yeah.
So one of my bets this week, it turned out to be kind of an unpopular bet because I had LSU at home minus 13.5, and the line went down to 10.
Right.
By the time the game started. So, but I
easy cover though.
They were just gonna beat up Ole Miss, and I think that's going to be a different story against Florida.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see. I actually was really surprised that. So I took Mississippi State -7 last weekend, or yesterday. I keep saying last weekend. Yesterday against Florida, and my reasons for that were that I wasn't impressed with Florida's line play through like the first kind of quarter of the season, and I thought Mississippi State would be pissed off after the UK game. I thought that their defensive line would just own Florida's offensive line, but that wasn't the case. It was an ugly defensive game. Florida still seems like they're having a little bit of trouble running the ball, but that's against Mississippi State. That's going to be tough. They have like NFL men on the defensive line, but I think
Nick Fitzgerald sucks at passing.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see if Franks can do. He's going to have to make some throws against LSU's defense. I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be a close game, and I'd have to dig more into it as far as like which way I would lean. I guess.
Low scoring game.
Yeah, low scoring game. It's tricky though. I really don't know which way I'd lean, but I think it's going to be. I think we're going to find out a lot more about these two teams this upcoming weekend. That's for sure. So is there anything else you wanted to add for that game before you took off, dude, or is there any other points you wanted to make?
Just my last point. I'll give you my. I know you guys are going to get into it later, but I'll give you my winner and loser of the week.
Oh yeah, we're just getting ready to get into that. So yeah.
And then I'll get your feedback and kick off. But
sure.
Winner of the week for me is Ian Book. I think officially holding down that Notre Dame quarterback position.
Yeah.
I think that was huge, and he shined.
Yeah, he did.
I was at the bar. I was watching that game out of the corner of my eye. It just looked good. And then my losers of the week is all of the splashy coaching moves that have failed. So Tennessee, Nebraska, and UCLA.
Yeah,
they got a ways to go to rebuild that back up.
They definitely do, especially UCLA and Nebraska. Just they're basically like in year zero.
And then Google that Tennessee punt if you haven't seen it.
I have not.
that is just representative of the Tennessee program.
Another thing that's representative. That.
Yeah.
Did you see the play in that game where Georgia fumbled and the tight end scooped and scored it from like 30 yards out? That was another play that's just very Tennessee.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think those are solid picks. I mean, Book clearly, we're going to get into the Notre Dame Virginia Tech preview coming up in the pod later, but I mean, Book clearly looks like he has command of this offense. It makes Notre Dame definitely like I think more close to like an elite team and a playoff contender than what they ever were going to be with Brandon Wimbush. It completely has changed the outlook of their season, I think, so far, and we're going to find out even more about him coming this next weekend. But yeah, those other teams are those.
You're in a good place as the quarterback in Notre Dame, and you're coming back to the sideline and not getting your head ripped off.
Yeah, like you're finally just not in the field.
That's the win of the week, man.
Yeah, nice. So, all right, man. Well, it's good to have you on as always, and hopefully we can get you back on next weekend. All right.
All right, I'll be back.
All right, take care. All right, Larry too.
Later.
All right, so yeah, he always gives good analysis, and I'm glad we could get him on for the LSU Florida preview, just because I think we were a little unsure about that game, and he has the inside scoop being down in that area. New Orleans obviously close to LSU, so I guess, and that was a good segue. We'll get into our Week 5 winners and losers for the week, then we'll get into our bets, and then the Week 6 preview. I guess I'll start. My winners for the week were Clemson's third-string quarterback, Chase Bryce. So Kelly Bryant, obviously, last week decided to transfer when Dabo Swinney made the move to true freshman Trevor Lawrence. We speculated, well, what happens if Lawrence gets hurt or what if he struggles?
Yeah,
then Bryant,
didn't take long.
I felt like Bryant made a premature decision.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Like, some people are 50-50. Some people say it was selfish. Other people say that he needs to look out for him. I'm personally on the side of the fence that I think you should finish what you start. I think he's still a leader for the team, even if he's not on the field. And so I felt like he shouldn't have walked out on his team. I was very against that move. But the fact for this kid, Chase Bryce, to come in, who was never expecting to play, to come in and make some big plays, not give the game away, help them get a game-winning drive, which who knows by the end of the year, it could have saved their season because of how top-heavy this year is. Like a loss is a lot worse this year than it was in previous years. But he was one of my winners, so he kind of helped hold down the fort for now. We don't know about the extent of Lawrence's injuries, I don't think yet. But my other winner was this is funny. So I had Virginia Tech as my loser last week. Everybody had Virginia Tech as their loser after getting smoked by Old Dominion. They were my winner this week, rebounding, going to Duke and actually like kind of taking it to them. Specifically, their new quarterback. They made a quarterback change. They went with ta-da, his name is Ryan Willis, who we just referred to him as Kansas on the pod because Corey from Denver, if you guys watch the pod, is obviously a Virginia Tech fan and alum. He would just talk about the Kansas transfer. This guy is, he's probably not that good, but he's got a stronger arm than Joshua Jackson. He had 10 starts at Kansas. He broke a beer bottle over the punter's head at Virginia Tech. So, I kind of was a fan of this guy already. I liked his attitude. But he came in, did very well against Duke when I dug into their stats. I didn't get to watch any of the game. But those were my winners for the week. My loser was James Franklin. I think Franklin's a good coach, but sometimes, as Tolman alluded to, how he will hold back certain stuff for these big games. I think sometimes he overthinks some spots in these games. I don't understand the Wildcat wrinkles taking the ball out of McSorley's hands. Obviously the last play call of the game, and I heard McSorley talk about this after the game. He said they saw a crease. He saw it, the coaches saw. They all agreed that they should run essentially what was a running play on 4th and 5. And that's a spot where I don't want to be results oriented. If they got the first down, everyone would probably be like, they ran the ball. That was a deceptive, gutsy play call. But I think in that moment, when you're playing a front seven like Ohio State has, especially the defensive line, I'm not running the football on 4th and 5, and I'm not taking the ball
smothered
out of Trace McSorley's hands. I want him to have the option to make a play with his arm or his legs. I didn't get the call. James Franklin, you are 100% my loser for the week. Your winners and losers.
Oh, I finally found my loser. This is a good one.
Okay.
Anyway, winner. I'm going to go Ohio State just from pulling out that big win.
Clearly.
Also got Kentucky, who keeps surprising people.
Yeah.
Beating some good teams, and they're still undefeated.
Kentucky, not to interrupt, but Kentucky is now a 3-time winner of the week on this podcast this year.
Yeah.
It's out of 5 weeks. It's insane. So,
yeah, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
But before the season, they were a complete afterthought. We just
said
skipped
nothing
over
about it. I turned the page and I said, I don't have anything to say about Kentucky.
They like to run the football. I like teams that can do that.
Yeah, they run the ball. They play D. Yeah.
Yeah. My biggest loser, got to go back to Thursday night. A few of us actually had UNC.
Yeah.
And they pretty much just threw the game away to Miami, gave up 3 defensive touchdowns.
Yeah.
The turnover chain was coming out a lot, and it was like the perfect Miami game where they're getting tons of turnovers and they're really hyped. And UNC just looked absolutely pathetic. Chaz Surratt, terrible throwing the football.
That's a loser.
Yeah. So UNC.
Yeah, he's really, really bad.
Playing absolute garbage. Couldn't cover the 17.5 points. Actually, not even close.
Yeah, not even close. And of course, I feel like Miami's always just given games like this.
I know.
They didn't play that well. They just were given the ball. I don't understand. So let's get into so those are our winners and losers. Let's get into our week 5 best bets and worst bets. We'll give one each for each person. I'll start with Corey from Denver. He had a little bit of a rough week. This podcast this year has just not been betting up to expectation yet. I expect this to progress back towards the mean. We're still trying to get our footing, but Corey had, let's see here, one of his better bets I would say was Yeah, Florida plus 7.5. They won the game outright. He and I were on opposite sides of this bet. He liked Florida very early in the week. Florida clearly proved that they look like they're improving under Mullen. And we said on this pod that we like Dan Mullen. We think Florida's going to be pretty relevant with him moving forward, so that was a good bet. He had a few bets to choose from his worst bets. I guess I'll go with a Friday night game, which Corey from Denver has said he's retiring from Friday night betting. He had Memphis minus 14 or at Tulane. Tulane won this game by 3+ touchdowns, I think, like outright.
Yeah, they won big.
So that was not a very good bet. Steele, his best bet of the week, we'll give him, I don't know. Let's see. We'll give him
West Virginia or UCF.
Yeah,
maybe.
UCF. Him and I both had both of those. UCF throttled Pitt. Pitt is Pat Narduzzi. All this talk about Pat Narduzzi's defense and how good he was at Michigan State, how good Pitt's defense was going to be. For 2 years in a row, Pitt's defense is like around 100-something in efficiency. They're giving up explosive plays. UCF continuing the win streak, like they're pretty damn good. So
haven't lost for a year and a half,
and they're throttling teams. Yeah. So Steele with a good bet there. One of his worst bets. We'll go with Nebraska, I guess. Well, I don't know. When I dug into that game, Nebraska actually played pretty well. They just
Nebraska put up
points.
I was surprised to see how many yards they put.
They had more yards per play too.
Yeah.
And we're going to get in possible leans for week 6 next week, but that could be a team that I look at. But he had a couple others. He had South Carolina was, I guess, a bad bet. Well, a lot of us in the pod had that. Kentucky took care of business against them.
I'm not messing with the Blue Cats right now.
And you were smart. You were the only one that wasn't on that. So go ahead with yours, and then I'll give mine after that.
Finally a good week.
Yeah. Great
I
week.
actually I didn't even dig deep into any of these games. I just went with my gut feelings on a lot of them. I didn't have a ton of bets, but went 6-2-1. Got back to above 500 on the year. Still not beating the VIG, but another good week, and we'll be there. The Ohio State Penn State under, when I saw this was 71, I thought that was ridiculous.
Absurd.
For a Big Ten game between these two teams. Now, I know that the reason it was so high was because Ohio State, Penn State both came in averaging 50-plus points a game.
Yeah.
Last year's game was high scoring. That's in people's minds too. But Big Ten football games, I can't remember ever seeing a Big Ten football game total set at 71. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty easy win.
Yeah.
Cuse almost got the straight up win. Yeah.
That was one of my bets too. Yeah.
Cuse plus 25, so that was a good bet. My worst bet of the week. Well, I mentioned UNC. They were terrible. Michigan also.
I had that too.
I thought they were going to dominate Northwestern. Northwestern had been doing this thing so far this year where they kind of play two. Yeah,
they're doing this thing where they suck.
They suck, and they were also playing two quarterbacks,
Yeah.
which I don't like. They had Thorson on a pitch count, so they would just pull him out randomly, in the middle of the game. And
That's stupid.
yeah. And their leading rusher just retired before this game.
He's now a student assistant coach.
Yeah, so just everything that had been going on with Northwestern, I thought Michigan was playing well now, and I thought they were going to roll. They got in a 17-0 hole and then battled back for the win, but really never were any threat of covering it.
Yeah. All right, so I'll give one each for mine. I'm confused because Steele, as a joke, marked like almost all mine red. I know I didn't do that poorly, but
Yeah.
I actually think I had a winning week. But I guess my best bet, I'll go with Fresno -7 versus Toledo. I felt very strongly about this one. They ended up winning this game by 3 or 4 touchdowns, I think. So that was a good one, I guess, a late night, just kind of whatever bet. And then my worst bet, I guess, I don't know. There's a couple that suck, but I'll say that Indiana -17 at Rutgers. Rutgers is very bad. I felt like Indiana had been playing decent ball this year, but Indiana should never be favored by 17 over anybody.
Yeah,
so,
I agree with that.
I don't
Rutgers is really bad, though.
Yeah, but so I don't know. I guess that was bad. But yeah, so whatever. The pod is still under 500 right now, but I expect this to progress to the mean as I crushed the last couple years before that. So let's now finally get into our Week 6 preview. This week, again, was like weeks 2 to 4, where there's just not that many good games. As far as like ranked games on the slate, there was some decent like mid-tier games I saw, but they're not ones that we're going to preview on the pod because it would take way too long. We already got into LSU Florida a little bit while we had David from New Orleans on the pod, so we're not going to talk about that. The two games are going to be the Red River rivalry, Texas, Oklahoma, and then Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, which is a bigger game for this pod than maybe most other people because half of this podcast likes those two teams. Steele is a Notre Dame fan. Corey from Denver is a Virginia Tech alum and fan. So pretty big game for this pod. We'll start with Texas OU. This game traditionally is pretty close, especially recently. It was, I think, a 5-point victory for Oklahoma last year. Texas covered, or 5 or 6 points, I don't remember.
Yeah,
but,
it was close.
But yeah, I'll let you. I guess the main question for me right away before I get into my notes is my question is simply: can Texas slow down Kyler Murray? How do you see the game going? Like, what are some keys that you look to see? Like, I don't know, all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, I think Texas is playing better now. I mean, after their Week 1 loss to Maryland, I was kind of down on them, but they.
As we should have.
They're getting things back together. They handled USC,
right?
Beat TCU, and then this past week they were dominating Kansas State, and then they let them come back.
Yeah.
Ended up pulling out the win. I don't know. I expect it to be, the typical close game, like you said. I wanted to pull up and see what the
the line's 7.5.
Okay,
I don't know what it opened at, but it's Oklahoma 7.5.
Yeah, I'm probably going to take Texas.
Yeah, we talked about this last night when we were just slamming beers after the OSU game. I think here's the thing this year, which it gives me a little pause, but it's similar to last year where Texas, in my notes here, I dug into like some of Bill C's like the metrics and stuff. Texas has been efficient on defense. They've been kind of below average on offense, but they've been giving up a lot of explosive plays. Like they're ranked like in the 100th, whatever. Like they're like 100 something in as far as like explosive plays on defense.
Where's Ohio State at in that ranking?
I think they're lower, but I'm not maybe that like they're not as low as I thought they would be, but they're pretty low. I think.
Yeah, I mean that's surprising. Like it's surprising that Ohio State's that low.
Yeah, there's actually a few teams that are elite. Like Georgia's been not good on defense. Like when we finally get into a game where we feel like we have to preview Georgia, I'll let you guys know that Georgia. I feel like Georgia's a top 4 team, but Georgia's got some flaws on defense. But anyway, this is about Texas, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's been really explosive. They've been very efficient on offense. Now, where this game I think could be decided is like I got a little deeper into these notes or these analytics. Like Texas they're losing the field position battle, but they've been forcing a lot of red zone field goals, and that's how you get covers is if you don't let teams score touchdowns in the red zone. OU's been vulnerable on third and medium and short. Texas has got to stay ahead of the sticks in this game. They've got to possess the ball.
Yeah, keep it away from Oklahoma.
Keep it out of Kyler Murray's hands. Yeah, if I don't think I'll probably have a bet in this game, but just for the sake of the pod, I think I would lean Texas. Like Texas they keep the game close. It's a rivalry. I think Texas has definitely gained confidence after for the second straight year, surprising loss to Maryland. But then they beat USC, who were like, we don't really think USC's that good this year. But then they beat TCU, who a lot of people after the OSU game were like, man, TCU, they're like possibly a legit top 15 team, and Texas handled them pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see how this game goes. But I don't know. I think we both feel like I would say that I give Texas a shot to win the game. I mean, if I'm going to cover, I think
that's why I would take the points.
Yeah.
I definitely think Texas.
I think win this game. I think Oklahoma will win, but I think this game is going to be tighter than I think. I think the public will hammer Oklahoma on this, to be honest, just because of how flashy they look. They
put up a lot of points.
The one thing that does give me pause is we've talked about this with Texas before. This is a big game for this program, in my opinion. Like when's the last time we felt like Texas won a major game? Like this is a big game for this team. If they win this game. I mean,
that one Notre Dame game.
Oh yeah.
when what's his name said that Texas is back, and then they went
lost
5-7.
They were terrible. Yeah. So this is a big game for Texas. If they win this game, I think they'll prove to a lot of people that maybe they are on their way back to being what they think they should be and what they should be.
Mhm.
They make too much money and have too many high school recruits that go there. So let's move into, I guess, the game that this pod really cares about. I've got some thoughts from Steele and Corey from Denver on this game. I mean, I think the main first question I have is how does Virginia Tech's pass defense hold up against Notre Dame's against Book, against the offense? I think that it's interesting that you got two newer quarterbacks in this game. Ryan Willis, a.k.a. Kansas, his first start against a very, I think, competent team and in a more pressure-packed situation. I'm curious to see how he handles that. What do you think about this game? The line is 5 right now. I actually took Notre Dame -5. I'll get into that later why, but
yeah, I just remember that I was leaning Virginia Tech in the Duke game.
We should have bet it 100%.
It's
a perfect spot to bet them.
It was a huge bounce back weekend for Virginia Tech after the embarrassing loss to ODU.
Yeah,
they come back and they go to Duke. They've got the new quarterback in there, and they win pretty decisively. And Duke's been a pretty good team this year, so that's a pretty good win. And it's maybe they've got some confidence back now.
Right.
This is gonna be probably Notre Dame's toughest road environment they play in this year, right? They don't have a lot of true road games.
They don't.
USC isn't a tough environment.
No, USC is not a tough environment.
So.
Yeah, this is 100% their hardest game on the road.
Because their other road games are Northwestern and USC.
Yeah, jokes.
Yeah,
those aren't hard places to play. I think Northwest. I don't know. It's kind of interesting because I don't know. I don't want to get into these, but yeah, Virginia Tech is definitely the hardest road environment they're gonna have to play in. So I think let's get into Steele's thoughts real quick, and then I guess I'll say what he said, and then we'll kind of go back and forth based off what he said. So he says Notre Dame will win if Ian Book is protected. He thinks the defense is going to get more stops than Virginia Tech's. He said it's a tough road environment, and they're going to need to weather any potential early storms fast. They need to start fast. They can't keep Virginia Tech's crowd in the game. He says if the pass is any indication, and I actually think this is a valid point, Fuente seems to get kind of conservative in these moments. Against Florida State, he seemed kind of conservative, like he wasn't keeping the foot on the gas pedal, being aggressive. I don't know if that'll change with Ryan Willis in there, but the thing is, it's his second start. I don't think he even knows what he's going to get in this kind of game.
Willis, by the way, did have a good game against Duke.
Very good game, yeah. Steele says look out for Dexter Williams to be an X factor. He said that he is back from suspension. There's some injuries at running back. Williams is a talented player. I think he's one of those guys where he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can make some guys miss. He says look out for lots of Boykin and Chase Claypool in the passing game. I think those are that's going to be the main matchup that I'm looking to see is Notre Dame's big athletic receivers against Virginia Tech's kind of young and I guess prone to giving up big plays secondary.
Yeah.
What do you think about his thoughts?
Virginia Tech's got some size though in their secondary.
They do. They are.
Guys.
Yeah. They are a little taller.
I'm curious to see what Bud Foster's got up his sleeve in this game. Can he get Book rattled at all? So that's going to be one of the keys.
Yeah, Corey. So we'll get. That's a good segue into Corey's point. So he said get pressure on Book. He says. They can't let Book extend and be able to make plays because the DBs cannot cover. They can't stick with Notre Dame's receivers for that long. And that goes for really you're even the best corners in the world can't stick with receivers for that long, but that's especially true for young, aggressive, kind of green corners, you know what I mean? But he said he looked for Bud to mix a lot of random 3- and 4-man fronts. They did that against Duke. Book is still pretty inexperienced relative to other quarterbacks. I think that could be interesting. We could see
that's
him
why it's
get
key,
a lot of pressure.
going on the road.
Yeah. So he says that Virginia Tech's got 3 big receivers of their own. You could see some back shoulder fades, some deep routes for them. Stanford did complete some stuff. Arcega Whiteside. We said. I mean, there's some room to move the ball a little bit on Notre Dame, even though Notre Dame does have a very good defense.
Yeah.
We said it's for them, it's about the trenches, and I think that's where Steele thinks the game, as a lot of games will be decided, he thinks Notre Dame is elite in the trenches compared to Virginia Tech. But I think that, yeah, and then Corey's last points are we can't give up short fields. It's the blueprint for field position would be like the Florida State game where the Virginia Tech punter had them inside their 15 for like 3 or 4 straight possessions. So it's going to be interesting. I took Notre Dame tonight already -5, and it's not that I don't think Virginia Tech has a shot in this game. It's more I see like a pretty rough matchup for their secondary. Like I do think that Bud Foster is going to throw a lot at Ian Book, but Notre Dame's line has been pretty solid. They did just lose one of their starting guards for the year, but apparently the guy replacing him is a senior. He's played a lot. I think Notre Dame is going to be able to make plays down the field and have some explosive plays. I think their defense is going to put Virginia Tech in a spot where they're a little more one-dimensional than they want to be. And I'm not sure. I'm banking on Willis maybe not handling that the best. He hasn't seen that kind of front, that kind of pressure. It's a lot different when like you like the defense knows what you're going to do. It's like passing downs, that kind of thing. So I see value in the 5. Like I think Notre Dame's a 10-point favorite at like a neutral site in my opinion. So that's why I have Notre Dame -5. But Virginia Tech's a tough place to play. It's a little bit of an unknown with how Book will handle Bud. It's an unknown with Willis. So it could be a spot where it'd be like maybe a no bet. But I personally just see a big plus matchup for Notre Dame in the passing game.
Yeah. This one's at night, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah, it's the 8 o'clock game. So I do think Notre Dame wins and covers, obviously. How do you see if you like I know it's Sunday night, but if you had a lean.
My lean would be Notre Dame probably.
To cover?
Yeah.
And win? Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have like strong thoughts on it either way right now.
Right. And the thing with this pod is that can change. That's why you guys got to check back for the bets in the description later in the week, because we've had some thoughts on the pod where it's Sunday night. We haven't been able to dig into as much stuff as we want yet. And then later in the week, you guys might see a bet on the pod where you're like, wait a minute, they like the other side during the actual pod. But sometimes when we dig more into these games, that's what happens. Now, this one, clearly, I've already bet Notre Dame. I feel strongly about that. But, for example, last week, Steele liked OSU to not only win but to cover, but then 2 days later, he booked Penn State +4. He just felt like he dug a little bit more into it. He liked them. They obviously covered. So sometimes things change through the week. Obviously, there could be players that get hurt in practice. There could be stuff we don't know about as far as like suspensions or whatever. That's obviously more rare, but it'll be interesting. I think these are 2 games that, there's never, to me, I know that we're bigger like college football fans, but there's never a dull slate. Like I think Texas OU is going to tell us a lot about Texas and if they're actually on their way back. And then we're going to find out a lot. Is Virginia Tech closer to the team that stomped Florida State and Duke? Is Ryan Willis a legit replacement for the injured Joshua Jackson? Or are they closer to the team that got smoked by Old Dominion? Is Notre Dame for real? Are they going to go in here and show that they're a legit playoff contender? Because, like we said, this game until – I mean, I don't know. These aren't like – some of these teams are bad, but like they just don't have a game after this until like at USC, in my opinion, that I think that they could potentially trip up on.
None of those games you really expect to lose.
I think this is the hardest. This might be the hardest game remaining, just because of the environment involved with it. So,
I think until USC, it is the toughest remaining game.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting week, even if there aren't as many like ranked matchups. So
in some weeks like this, I say that they end up being surprising. Sometimes the weeks where people say there's no good matchups, that's when craziness
there's the most
happens.
Chaos, right? Like you get a team that you just never expect to lose, like a top 5 team, and they lose.
Yeah, no weeks are, as long as there's football on, it's a good week. So.
Yeah, right. So to wrap up the pod, we always give like some upcoming week leans or bets. I already said I bet Notre Dame -5. I think I already said I took Washington -21 at UCLA. I think UCLA is very inefficient and horrific on offense. Their defense is inefficient. Washington, I think, is going to smother them. Even if they look ahead a little bit, I don't see Washington not covering that number. I think they're 4 touchdowns.
I'll definitely Of course, I want to see what the over-under is in that game.
Of course.
I've been taking a lot of Washington unders.
And that would be a game to look at the under again. Just not even just because of Washington, but UCLA is that bad on offense.
Yeah.
My other bet that I made, I actually took Northwestern plus 11.5 at Michigan State. Michigan State doesn't tend to do very well with like double-digit spreads, especially I think as like a home favorite. Northwestern under Pat Fitzgerald, and we talked about this the other day. We're like, I'm not a big like when they talk about betting, talk about trends. The trends have to be like relevant. Like there's some trends that mean nothing to me, and then there's others that mean more. Recently, Northwestern's played very well, covered the number a bunch at Michigan State. These coaches and these systems have been the same for a long time at both these schools. I think even though Northwestern lost to Michigan, I think this team's gaining a little bit of confidence. I dug into Michigan State's their game last week against Central Michigan. They won the game, but they didn't play that well. They again struggled to run the football.
Yeah, they just can't run it.
They can't run the ball
any week
at all. They're struggling a little bit against the pass. I think Thorson could complete some passes against them. I think Northwestern, this is going to be kind of an ugly game, and they keep it within that number. I think this is more like a touchdown game.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I don't have any other bets right now. I think the lines are kind of still coming out. I haven't been able to dig into it.
Yeah, I'm just looking through here. Like Florida State, just some noteworthy ones.
Right.
Florida State is plus 12.5 at Miami.
Yeah.
LSU's favored on the road at Florida, 3.5.
That's a short road dog. Those guys tend to cover a little more often than people think, but that's still an interesting spot.
Yeah, I'm not sure Florida should be underdog at home there.
Right. Another one that I was going to ask you about that I felt was kind of noteworthy was, at least, I don't know, it popped at me as, I know that Wisconsin's better than Nebraska, but it's a 3-touchdown spread. Nebraska with Adrian Martinez has been able to move the ball this year. Like, yeah. I think 3 touchdowns is a lot to ask of a Wisconsin offense who is not that explosive. Actually, the more I think about it, I think I'm just going to book it because Wisconsin's defense has not been that good this year. It's been okay, not up to their standards. They're not that explosive on offense. Nebraska's been able to move the ball. They've kind of faltered in other spots in games. I think it's I don't remember what time it is, but I think it's maybe like 4 or something. But I do like Nebraska potentially as a lean there, but I haven't been able to see any other ones. You see any other noteworthy ones, perhaps? I think Bama's like another 30-point favorite.
They're playing Arkansas.
Yeah, they play at Arkansas. They're like minus 34 or something like that.
Arkansas kept the game close against A&M.
Yeah.
I see Kentucky is...
That's a stinky line.
Plus 6 at A&M.
Yeah, that felt like a really stinky line to me. The public is going to hammer Kentucky. They love ranked dogs. They think Kentucky is... And I'm not saying Kentucky's not a good team, but I don't know. Should A&M actually be a 6-point favorite? Like, it's a really stinky line to me. I'm not so sure about that one. But are there any others before we wrap it up or any other points you want to make?
No, that's about it.
Okay. Yeah. So check back for the bets.
I think that Nebraska game's off the board. I can't find it.
Oh, shit. That sucks. I should have looked at it earlier. So, yeah, check back later in the week for our bets and look forward to the Texas OU and the Notre Dame and Virginia Tech game, and then we will be back on next week.